What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode. Welcome to another video. Thank you for joining in. Today I'm going to talk about edges and how they relate to values and how it's going to push your drawings to the next level or even your sketches. Because in painting, if you think about painting, and I mostly do painting, edges are what separate the amateurs from kind of the more intermediate painters. So drawing is kind of the same way. Basically the edge of an object, so if we have a sphere, which is actually a ball, if we had like a tennis ball, real quick tennis ball, real rough tennis ball here, and that's sitting on something, so you kind of have like, make it a little more 3D. If you have light coming from over here, from the left, you have a light source. Well, the shadow, we've already gone over stuff like this, but this is going to demonstrate my point a little better. So the shadow is going to be over here, obviously, on this sphere. Something like this. Real quick, anyway. So this is the shadow side. This is the light side now. When edges come into play is when you have the values, when the values start getting closer. So the background is also, we'll say it's a dark background. And this shadow side is going to be really dark. So it's going to make that light pop right here, this edge. It's going to be a really sharp edge due to the darkness of the background and the lightness of the sphere. So what happens here? Just by observing this, you can set up a still life, you can set this up yourself and just observe this. But what happens is these edges, you can see, became a lot softer and it looks more realistic that way. And why did these edges, see, there's no real defined edge here anymore. Sometimes you lose the edge, sometimes there's going to be a little bit of an edge, and then other times there's a really sharp edge which defines the brightest bright from another dark. And this is real critical because this becomes your focal area where that light is hitting. That is now the focal area. You're saying something, you're losing the edges here. It creates this focal area. The eye tends to go to high contrast and sharp edges, sharp lines like that. The edges usually start to disappear when the values become closer to each other, when the values become really similar. I hope that makes sense to you. So we could say this darkest dark is like a number 10 value. Like if we're doing 1 to 10, 1 being the lightest, this lightest area will be a 1, this darkest area will be a 10, and maybe the shadow side on this ball is like, between a 7 and an 8. So obviously this shadow on the ball here is much closer to this really dark area right behind the ball. It's going to have something more in common with this very dark area. We'll say this is, the shadow side of the ball, and then this is the light area. Number 7, number 8, right here on the ball has something more in common. It's way closer to this darkest dark. The edge is going to kind of disappear almost. It's going to soften up. It's going to be a softer edge. So there's soft edges, there's hard edges, and you can see here when you compare a light to this, there's more contrast here between 1 and 10 than there is between 7 or 8 and 10. So there's a definite, these relationships that you're trying to build through your painting and that you're observing, or through your drawing, and your sketches. You're just observing these. So draw them as you see them. They may not be this dramatic. Let's move on. I'm going to show just another example. And something that a lot of beginners and people that just start out drawing, what they tend to mess up the most is when they're doing portraits, and that's the nose or even the mouth. So if we're drawing a nose on someone, it's going to be, a lot of beginners, they tend to just draw the outline of the nose and the nostrils, and they just draw the whole outline. And you can see that it's not very realistic to draw these sides of the nose and have it, draw all these hard lines, hard edges. That's more of a cartoony look. the nose is very soft around the face. So what you would have to do is blend these out. You have to use your shading techniques that you learned in previous videos and you learned elsewhere. You would have to, instead of creating this hard line, you have to use transitions of softness. And this is where a good exercise that's going to come in that in a later video that I have is creating a gradient scale from 1 to 10 basically, or 1 to 9. And that's going from darkest all the way to light. And being able to control that pressure and creating these different transitions and not having them come across very streaky or anything like that. So that's just another little tidbit, but this is going to help you create these softer areas where they need to be soft. So when you're drawing a portrait and you have like a face, we'll just draw something really quickly here. These are just sketching videos, you know. So you have this head, this rough head, eyes are going to be there. You know, when you're drawing a nose, you're not just going to draw it in like this with a hard line like that. You're going to think about it first, and you're going to observe. If you're using a photograph, you're drawing from life, whatever it may be, and you're going to use shading. You're going to use the shadows of the nose to kind of create the shape of the nose. And you know, same with the eyes. And this is really going to change how you look at something and think about something, and think about it. So using the shadow areas to define the facial features, you know, it's different than going in there with these dark lines, hard lines. That creates hard edges, and it's not going to come across realistic. So do not do that. So like I was showing here, you just want to shade. You know, you can use edges to your advantage. So you can even take what you observe and you can exaggerate it. So like I did on that sphere on the last page, you can exaggerate the edges. You can completely lose an edge if you like. There's no rules when it comes to art and drawing, but it's going to be best to draw exactly what you're observing. When you're drawing these shapes from real life, I'm drawing my kneaded eraser here. You know, there's a cast shadow, but the shadow isn't really defined. Sometimes shadows aren't going to be really defined. They're just masses. You have to think in terms of masses instead of lines. Drawing is made up of both. It's made up of lines, different kinds of lines, and there's also different kinds of drawings that you can do, just line drawings. Some people do realistic drawings. So it just depends. The drawings are made up of lines, but they're also made up of masses, which is just area of value. You know, having this area of value here with the shadow, but you can see the shadow actually, it transitions to being softer and then disappears. So there's no defined line like this of where the shadow actually is. So you have to understand that, you know, softening up an area, a line like this cast shadow is going to be important to creating a realistic image. So keeping that soft, and by soft I just mean blended out. It's just shaded. There's no lines. So I hope that makes sense. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something and you didn't waste your time. Let me know what you want to see in future videos. Let me know. Observe these edges in the real world, in your drawings, and look at paintings. Look at the masters, how they drew. You know, look at these edges. You know, you'll definitely determine where things are soft, where things are hard. You know, usually around an object there are going to be hard edges for the most part. But then something like this cast shadow, the edges around it, which is the defining lines around that shadow, are going to be much softer when compared to the actual object. Keep that in mind. Just keep drawing and observing and do your best. Anyway, like, share, comment, subscribe, post comments down below. Let me know what you think, and follow me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. Take care of yourself. Peace.